everyone. Welcome. You have made your way to getting equipped with the Resilient Food System Infrastructure Program, our October Network Café for this month, part of our 2024-2025 Network Cafe series. So welcome. I'm Colleen Jennings. I'm the communications coordinator for the New Hampshire Food Alliance. We're going to start things off like we always do with lots of introductions. So I'd again love for everybody to introduce themselves in the chat, their name, the organization they represent, if that's applicable, as well as maybe where you're calling in from. Anything you'd like to share with folks in the chat, that would be great. Also in the chat right now is our agenda for the day. You're welcome to start taking a look at that and kind of seeing where we're going to be headed. The next introduction I'd like to do is a little bit about the Food Alliance and who we are. I am one person of a small but mighty team that make up the New Hampshire Food Alliance. Together, we coordinate a network of over 200 organizations, businesses, and communities that are dedicated to growing a thriving, fair, and sustainable local food system here in the Granite State. We do that all together. All those organizations that you see up on that slide right now, we do that together, that work together through building relationships, learning from each other, and working together, collaborating on different projects, all to achieve the common goal of bettering our food system and getting more local food out into our community. One of the ways we do this work is through our Network Cafe series, which is what you're participating in right now. They happen on the first Friday of each month, September through April. And we bring everybody together in this space as a place for everyone to learn about a topic or an issue that's our food system is facing right now. So it's really timely and really a way for people to come to an issue, maybe not knowing something, and walk away with a really good, clear understanding of what's going on. And we do that by inviting experts on the topic at hand to talk about it and answer questions, share some presentation, and lead a little bit of discussion and breakout session at the end to kind of really drive home what we're trying to get people to learn. So this year, we're going to spend a lot of time on a bunch of different topics. I'm excited about what we're bringing you today, but we're going to be talking about anything from farm to school to seafood supply chains all throughout this Network Cafe series. And we do all this work as a way to be inclusive, to bring people in to an opportunity to learn together, whether this is your first Network Cafe or you're a regular. We do this as a really inclusive space for everybody. And it's a part of our work as a community outreach program of the Sustainability Institute at UNH. So we are a part of that program. And as a part of the university, we always like to remember to highlight the university's dedication to diversity, equity, access, and inclusion. We believe at our organization and as a part of the university that those 4 tenets are foundational to achieving our core educational mission and embracing the many characteristics of our community members that make them uniquely themselves. So with that in mind, I would love to lead everybody in a land acknowledgement, something we like to do when we're having gatherings like this to make sure that we are continually acknowledging the hardships of the Indigenous communities that in our region. So I'm going to read a little bit from the acknowledgement right now. As we all journey on the trail of life, we wish to acknowledge the spiritual and physical connection the Pennacook, Abenaki, and Wabanaki peoples have maintained to Indakina, homeland, which the University of New Hampshire community is honored to steward today. We also acknowledge the hardships they continue to endure after the loss of unceded homelands and champion our responsibility to foster relationships and opportunities that strengthen the well-being of the Indigenous people who carry forward the traditions of their ancestors. So thank you for everyone for joining me in that acknowledgement. I'd like to turn to our topic for today, which is really, really exciting. We have some very esteemed network partners joining us as the experts for a presentation about a really game-changing funding opportunity for our food system. So that's all I'm going to say because I am not the expert. I'm going to pass it to our program director, Nicole Cardwell, and she's going to introduce our presenters and our topic.
Thanks, Colleen. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. I am just going to take a moment to set the scene for our desired outcomes for the next 55 minutes or so of our time together on this beautiful Friday. As I'm sure many of you are aware, a year or so ago, the USDA awarded funding to all the states for a program called the Resilient Food System Infrastructure Program. The New Hampshire Department of Agriculture, Markets, and Food was awarded $2.6 million towards that program. And the end goal of it is to strengthen and make our food system more resilient. And we received that money and made a plan to accept that money thanks to the very hard work of the two gentlemen joining us today, Seth Wilner and Josh Marshall, Assistant Commissioner Josh Marshall. So we're really glad to have them here today to paint a picture of how New Hampshire plans and is utilizing that money to strengthen our regional our food system in the state. We want to help to also share this partnership at the center of it that I think makes it so special, and I'm really grateful for, which is a partnership between the New Hampshire Department of Ag Markets and Food, UNH Cooperative Extension, and the New Hampshire Food Alliance. So over the next half an hour or so, you'll hear from Seth and Josh about the different components of the RFSI program in New Hampshire. And then we'll spend the last 25 minutes or so. Seth has some questions for you that we're really excited to get your input and ideas on. And I won't share too much about that before you understand the broader context of it. So I'm handing it over to Seth now. Thank you for being here, Seth. Take it away.
Thanks. I'm just going to kind of set up a little bit of an overview and then hand it to Josh. So this Resilient Food System Infrastructure Grant Program that Nicole was talking about in each state. In New Hampshire, the way that we have set it up, there are two $1 million pots for grants that Josh will share and explain about. And then there was money that New Hampshire Food Alliance is using to lead a strategic plan that many of you know about. And then there will be money for direct technical assistance for food businesses and for farms. And then there will also be money for professional development. And that's where we really are looking at loving input and identifying food businesses and farms that we'll talk about later that offer us potential for new models and alternative ways. And so with that, Josh, please take us away.
Great. Yeah. If you want to go back to the last slide, perfect. Thank you for setting the stage, both Nicole and Seth, and thanks for the intro, Colleen. Before I get to talking about some of the specifics, I don't get an opportunity all the time to just share how excited I am about this program. I'm usually here to talk about the nuts and bolts or how it's administered and things like that. But this RFSI program is really targeted to states like New Hampshire. Now, all 50 states are receiving funding, but up here in the Northeast, we have a lot of small farms. We have a lot of really diversified farms where some of the traditional funding methods and available USDA money is not targeted. And here this program is, and it's for the middle of the supply chain. So it's not for production ag and it's not for direct retail. It's really for things like processing, aggregation, distribution, and value add production. And I think that's what the New Hampshire food system is needing some investment in. We'll hear from you all later to either corroborate that or add other things. But so I just wanted to share how excited we are to be a part of this investment in New Hampshire agriculture. So the infrastructure grants program is in process. We gave about $1 million as a slate of 5 awards. We're working with USDA to do some more contracting and finish up the applications to make sure that everything is approved, and then those will be underway in 2025. So that's happening in the background. Right now, we're going to be talking about these equipment only grants. And this is the other $1 million that Seth mentioned. We wanted to be intentional with making sure that as much of this money went to the actual program rather than the administration. So we've set up 2 $1 million pots, one for infrastructure, one for equipment only. And then the rest of that money is in the supply chain coordination, and only about 60,000 or so is in direct administration. So we're really intentional with that. What you're going to see with the equipment only grant program, which we expect to launch a request for applications on December 1st, is a program with a maximum award of $100,000 with no match requirement that will go towards equipment that will help in those four categories: processing, aggregation, distribution, and value add. They're not going to be used for any construction. They can't be used for installation costs. They can't receive, they can't be for paying for staff time. They're specifically for the equipment itself. And what we're targeting in this equipment came from input from our stakeholders like you all. We had a couple of listening sessions and a survey that went out last year around this time to really identify what the priorities were in New Hampshire. And what we heard from you all was that gaps in cold storage, transportation and distribution needs, cooperative kitchens, and other shared value-added facilities, light processing for new products and culinary grains or different types of dairy processing, packaging and labeling equipment, and food waste were some of the priorities that folks were sharing with us. And then part of the whole USDA program and what we want to see between Extension and Food Alliance and the department is that these projects and the equipment has a direct benefit on more than just one New Hampshire food business. This is resilient food system infrastructure, not just for individual farms or food businesses, although that will have an effect. What we want to make sure is that this is a collaboration and that this money is going towards helping the food system in general. So we're going to see applications. The details of them will come out on December 1st, and we'll likely have another webinar at that point to kind of walk you through actually going through the application. But a couple of the things to be keeping in mind as we think about applying is we're going to want to see letters from collaborating farms or food businesses or other stakeholders. It could be a food pantry, it could be your school system or a hospital that wants to purchase more local food. We're going to want to see a really strong budget, which is accurate quotes or a reasonable justification for why you arrived at the number that you have. And then also the USDA has some outcomes and performance measures that they are going to ask for. And you're going to have to sort of present how many pieces of equipment you're expecting to buy, but also like how that will affect either your customer base or how many other farms and food businesses will be affected by it. So these are the kind of things that we want you to be thinking about before you see the full details of the application, is really be focusing on how is this part of a bigger issue within whether it's your region of the state or the state as a whole, and who else is going to benefit and collaborate with you on this. I'm definitely seeing the questions about the specifics of the other projects. We can get you that list. USDA has not officially confirmed our slate of awards, so right now it's still just New Hampshire's slate of awards. So we don't have anything up on our website quite yet, but we can get that information to folks if they're interested. Thinking about some examples of what we expect to see as projects with this equipment: flash freezers, delivery and refrigerated vehicles, shared value added. You can see the list. I don't have to read them all, but what they all have in common is that they either directly or they have the ability to help more than one operation. So we envision somebody purchasing a flash freezer to help their own product, but they could also then rent that space out to other local farmers or provide a service later to other farmers who want to store some of their produce. You have a glut of green beans and you can freeze them, or winter squash, butternut squash at the end of the season. Well, if you can cut that up and freeze it, you might be able to have a product that lasts longer through the season. And then obviously cold storage was another priority we heard for folks to keep that product lasting longer. Inventory management system, we think about how can people be more efficient in utilizing not only their own product, but if you have a farm stand that's sourcing stuff from other regional food businesses, how do you keep that? How do you keep track of that, and how do you do that in a way where you really have a data-driven approach to making your business successful? So I think that's a really high level overview of what the equipment grant is going to look like. Again, as we get closer to December, we'll have more details on what the application really looks like. But we wanted to keep this out there and keep you thinking about it before all the details come out. So Donna's question, both the infrastructure grant, which already existed, and this equipment grant, the ranking, the scoring rubric is part of the RFA. You can see what it was. There's nothing in there about existing or non-existing. It's about the intention of the specific project. Happy to answer any other questions before turning it over to Seth to sort of talk about that supply chain coordination side of this. So we've got those 2 pots of money for direct grants, but then that other 500 or so thousand is really for looking at ways that we can help anyone, people who maybe not have a specific project, but how we can look at supporting farmers to explore different marketing concepts or to become more efficient, to lead to more aggregation and increase markets. But yeah, I'm happy. I'll be sticking around for the whole time. So if there are any other questions I can help with, I'm happy to do so. Otherwise, just turn it over to Seth to kind of start the next part of the conversation.
Thanks, Josh. And we will have a Q&A after Seth's part too. So everyone feel free to add your questions to the chat, and Colleen will call them to Seth and Josh's attention before we go into small groups, or just raise your hand in the Q&A in a few minutes. All right, Seth, back to you.
Want to launch poll 1 and then launch poll 2, please, Colleen?
They're going to come up as 2 questions, so everyone can answer the first question and then answer the second one.
So you should be seeing a poll on your screen, and it asks you to guess what % of New Hampshire farms gross more than $25,000 per year.
It's looking, getting a lot of guesses for 10%. It's a few for 60%. Nobody at greater than 80 or 100%.
And here, when we are looking at gross, we're looking at like the total market value of what they sell. So the total amount of money that they receive.
Okay.
And then I see a second question. If you scroll down, oh, people are seeing it. They're answering it.
Yes. So the second question, what do you think the average annual profit margin percentage for a farm in the Northeast is? Right now, the most popular answer, Seth, is 5%. 39% of people say 5%.
Excellent.
And, yeah. First question, top answer was 10%.
All right. So we can end the polls.
Mm-hmm.
So what we really want to do with this next part is really kind of tease ourselves into what are ways that we could really help to transform and invest in a resilient food system. So I don't know if you all go through in any part of your life where you see the world where the sky is just not blue. So the rest of the world sees life one way, and you're in there just seeing an entirely different world. Because that is part of my experience in some 25 years working in extension, where I see, since I work in farm business management, so I work with farm families on profitability, on systems, on whole farm planning. I spend a bunch of time helping folks go into farming. And we seem to be stuck in the same model where, like, you go into farming and you do it on your own mostly. And maybe you'll go into, and everything's a silver bullet. It was the farmer's market, then it was the box CSA, and then it was the credit card CSA, and then it was the food hubs, and then it was home delivery. And there's always a silver bullet out there. But the data didn't seem to show me that there was like some really working model of silver bulletness. So here's some fun facts that you could look at that answer some of the questions. One, these are from the Ag Census. So it's not the most accurate data source ever around, but it's really what we have. So it's self-reported. So you can see I start at 2022, I go to 2017, and then down to 2007. You can look at the number of New Hampshire farms. And then you could look at the number of farms that are within that gross sales. So to give you another kind of look at this, to kind of help shape you and frame your mind, can we go to the next slide? Next slide, please.
I'm not sure. I don't know if Nicole's cut out.
There it is. So this is a graph looking at the percentage now. So you could see that 80%, well, 80 to 84%, but it's pretty consistent in almost 2 decades of New Hampshire farms gross less than 25,000. And so you add in then up to 100,000, and you're at 92 to 94% of New Hampshire farms. So we are a small farm state. So now we add in that profit margin question. So next slide, please. And there's not really great data out there. So Farm Credit East, PASA did their own research on benchmarking project. Mike Shebarasi and I did a benchmarking project. And then there is actually the New England Dairy Farm Summary is pretty darn good. But you can look at the profit margins. So for easy math, let's say if you're at 10%, you're doing good. If you're at 20%, you're doing really good. So let's just say 20%. So let's say that you are one of the lucky ones that are grossing, moving $100,000 through your farm operation. It means you're probably taking home 20. And that taking home 20 and that net profit, that also doesn't count principal on debt, which we know is also a big deal. So let's say that you're not in there. Let's say that you're in the 80 some odd percent that are in 25,000 or below. Now you're looking at what? Being an amazing operator in that 20% profit margin realm, 5K, maybe 7,500, right? So what does that say? It says going into farming and relying on it as your sole family income source is going to be one heck of a challenge if we go with this sole source model. Next slide, please. So what are the suggested pathways in the literature? Well, increasing scale. I don't know that I actually agree with that, because when you scale up, often your debt goes up. Often you need more labor, which is incredibly hard to find and is costing more. But you also, some of the things that you need is a more rigorous management system, certainly record keeping system, other things. Improving yields. How do you argue with improving yields? Yes, that certainly is really a positive thing. And that could be rate of gain if it's livestock, whatever have you. Diversifying product offerings, that seems to be something. Adding value. But again, look at the literature kind of focused on you as an entity doing something, as opposed to what we also see, that when you buy and resell, that really is a profitable strategy for many items. And so then you could see with all those strategies, you have all those challenges of land, labor, capital, so on and so forth. And as we've seen in the last 3 years, climate change is really quite a factor. So whether it's frosts or freezes, whether it's floods, whether it's droughts, and I mean, we've seen it way more than 3 years. So next slide, please. So we'd like to spend some time now having you all explore what would alternative models look like? Like, what would be other ways of having, a resilient food system in New Hampshire, or I should say, an even more resilient food system in New Hampshire? It's not like we don't have a good agriculture, but it is interesting to work with a new farmer who is asking you to help them develop a business plan so that they can make their living from farming, where all the data and all your experience suggests going in on your own and capitalizing and being your own farm and using that as your primary way of looking at farming probably isn't going to be the most likely and successful way of achieving that. And then people feel, and they're like, well, you're only a hobby farmer if you farm part-time, or if you have an off-farm job, or if your family has to rely on off-farm income. We'd love to have that not be the model people look at. So looking at these what do you see as viable? And then maybe we open that to discussion now. What are your thoughts on what you've just been presented as we begin this next part? And you can unmute yourself, or you can add it into the chat. Are there other models we're missing? Are there models that within this collaborative sales, co-branding, co-processing, sharing this equipment, sharing labor, what other opportunities are there? And what have you seen that is successful that you might want to raise up and elevate?
Can I go back a little bit and ask a question on the data, if there's any data for middle chain people in our food web? Because
Stephanie, could you just introduce yourself to Seth so he
sorry.
knows where it's coming from? I just want him to understand here.
Sorry, Stephanie from Micro Mamas. We're a vegetable processor. We ferment vegetables since 2012. Within our locally and within our region is where our products we're private label, and we own a processing facility in Ware, New Hampshire. And so it's really interesting because as a processor, I can also say that in the middle chain we have similar low margins to the farmers. So in this collaborative effort in assessing the models of how it works, we working with farmers have the same problems as the farmers.
And I didn't find any. Well, first, let me say, love your products.
Oh, thank
Big
you.
fan. And so your sauerkraut. But I didn't search for any data, nor did I find it. And even the data on profit margins that were out there, it was a lot of effort just to find that. And I can't even say, and there's such a variation in that data, I should say as well, right? So like where you look at it in the state, and how much did you inherit your farm? So you have low debt, all different type of things. I just wanted to give that generalized kind of, here is the challenge. And farms, we really are inviting them to, and food businesses, to keep records and look at it, but go in with your eyes wide open is really what the point of that data was. And then look at, okay, so let's at least look at models that allow those that are grossing, since they're 84% or 80 to 84% under 25,000. How do we help all those small farms succeed? And then you're saying in the middle of the food chain, how do we help those businesses that are processing succeed? And so I think one of the things is like, what are challenges in the middle of the food chain processing businesses, and what other models might exist for you all?
It's all very, very valuable. Go ahead.
No, if no one wanted to take this all, I would love to try do an example with you, Seth, if you don't mind.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm thinking of one of my favorite New Hampshire farms, Moulton Farm in Meredith, New Hampshire. And I'm looking at this list and wondering, and I think they're a really successful model in New Hampshire. And I'm trying to break down for myself what, how do they fit into this list of models? And I know that they do some collaborative sales. They have a farm stand where they sell from other small farms in the farm stand and some non-local food in the farm stand. They do some agritourism, and they have different ways of selling. They have like in the market, I know they do some wholesale selling. They have a CSA, and then they do some other things. I'm just wondering how, if you are familiar at all, like how you would think of that against this list, that example.
So I think Moulton Farm is a historically successful farm that captured market share and brand identity. And I think that they've been able to use that success and really lifting up other farms. And so that is a model of having potentially an anchor operation that's long-term been successful, potentially has cost controls because of the tenure of the farm. And so can then, yeah, reach out to other satellite farms and help them. Might be one way, and helping that farm could be different than just buying in product. I know Moulton Farm shares a lot of information, helps a lot of the growers around them in their community. So educating other farms as an intentional part of the business plan, absolutely. So yeah, so that could be one idea. Anchor farms with other smaller satellite farms going in.
Okay, thanks.
Just think off the top of my head. There's some more things in the chat.
Great.
Agritourism and profitability integrated. Agritourism is absolutely something that seems to be an additional profitable enterprise. Again, always encouraging every operation to do their own cost of production on such a thing as agritourism. But it's long been had that when you if you can create an experience that draws people to your farm, and so thus it's been linked to increased sales. Whether you're actually determining a true cost of production and selling at a profit would make the increase in sales effective or not, right? So we know that sometimes farms don't look at a cost of production, and so they're actually selling at a loss. So an increased sale at a loss, such as sweet corn, in my mind, I'm thinking probably isn't going to be to your benefit. And then I wonder about partnering farmers with philanthropists. So I see Hannah on here, and I really love my understanding of the sweet beet model as another model. So why not have the community intentionally and overtly invested in your operation? And so go, Hannah.
Oh, I definitely was going to raise my hand anyway, so I'm glad this is brought up. So we are the Kearsarge Food Hub. We're a nonprofit, but we have lots of different programs, which includes a farm, Sweet Beet Farm, which is an educational farm and a production farm. We gross this year $120,000 on the farm in under 2 acres of land. Although we do not net any profit essentially. So we are embedded in the nonprofit structure. And so we're able to like reallocate resources from philanthropy, and definitely finding a lot of people wanting to invest in these kinds of practices. So we do put a lot of effort into fundraising, stewardship, philanthropy. It definitely pays off for us. And then we get to have that kind of wiggle room to also educate, new and beginning farmers, which is a huge part of our program. We also have an annual event coming up, Love Local, where we feature different food system partners. Micro Mamas was our first ever feature back in the day. She's sponsoring our event coming up on November 12th. What's super cool is we're doing 3 middle of the food chain organizations this year: Fresh Start Farms, Food Connects, and the New England Young Fishermen's Alliance. They are all nonprofits. And because of the slim to none margin, especially in the middle of the food chain, they're using that same model, that same idea to provide support and build capacity for farmers, food growers, fisher folks, and kind of redirecting wealth in the community from the nonprofit model. I think there's a ton of potential there. Also, mark your calendars, November 12th, going to be great. An antidote for the election. I'm sure it's going to feel nice to connect. But yeah, I think there's a lot of potential there for sure.
Yeah, so that's an interesting model. And then, oh, sorry, Stephanie.
No, I was just going to point out how we seem to be in this circle that we somewhat, is approachable, and the assessing the models. But to me, it always comes back to do what Kearsarge Food Hub does, to do what middle chain or even farms have to do to assess different models for increased revenue takes time. And unless there is some philanthropy involved in creating money to make that time to then come back to the money part, we have two of life's greatest commodities of time and money that we need to somehow solve how they work together, because we can't have one without the other in our food web.
Yeah, and before I go on to Donna and then Josh, so agree with everything that's being said. And this point is what we were hoping for. This part of the program is happening. Let us think out loud. Let us envision. Let's look at pros and cons. There will be no one answer for everyone. Absolutely not. Before I get into Donna, I wanted to just answer an opinion on one of the hosts. Yes, there are self-sufficiency values. So as a farmer, I can derive and lower my own family food cost budget. I can also get other quality of life things, but that doesn't take away from the struggles of net profit and a viability of farms, and how we can increase the resilience and viability of our food system. So I think it adds to it, but it's not it doesn't offset the real struggles, and the fact that we have, like, it's not that we have 51%, we have such a large piece of that pie, as you saw, of farms that are really small. And so what do we do with that? So I'll go to Donna and then to Josh, and then we'll keep going on.
Seth, can I respond to something that before we move on from it, that Stephanie said? I just want to make sure that I'm not sure if you said this, and it's that the intention of this exercise and of this part of the vision for the program is that some of the funding will be used to fully understand and look into those models that are innovative and alternative and successful in our really unique food system in New Hampshire, and to look at and document in some simple, straightforward way, why is this working? What resource, if you think this model could fit your operation or what you're moving towards, what resources are available to support you in getting there? And one of the things we heard at the listening session with growers for the strategic plan was, like, it feels like, oh, I should scale up, I should sell wholesale, but should I really? Will that net out, or will I just be selling more for less money and working harder but not making more? And I think what Seth and Josh are envisioning with this part of the project is an exact response to that type of inquiry. What should I be working towards? And then who are the partners that are poised and ready to help me move in that direction? And so Seth is asking for your help, saying, like, what are the operations we should look to as good models so that we can help pull this information together in a clear way. Seth, I hope that was accurate, but I just wanted to sort of speak that in case there's any confusion. Okay, Donna.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I guess I just want to say that I'm hoping that this grant round can also have a little bit of wiggle room in terms of funding models that maybe haven't been tried exactly before. Some of the problems I have with food hubs or whatever is that they don't actually support helping other farms get established. And I say that from, the experience of when you have extra produce on your farm and you call up some of these people and, your operation is some fly by night operation and they say, no, we don't need those products now. Our other farms are producing these. What's needed is a place where excess production or coordinated production can be brought to, processed, and made available to the communities as food. And that involves, co-processing, like these models you've put up here. I just hope this can allow an inroad for truly small farms like the ones you say just aren't making any money. If the goal is to feed and build in more resiliency to our food system, no one's going to put their kid through Harvard being a farmer. So you need to get another career if that's what your goals are. So that's all.
And so and definitely there are farms in New Hampshire that make good money, but looking at that in aggregate is what I was trying to present. To your point though, as Josh was explaining kind of the grant criteria, so if you had a group of folks like you were just identifying saying, hey, we have all these seconds at different times of years and we need something to do with it, and this is like our solution to it, this piece of equipment would help us all flash freeze or do whatever, that's what's going to make a strong grant, so that folks can say, hey, this is really going to benefit these already identified growers or producers, or the businesses that already is doing it, such as Micro Mamas or Genuine Local, whomever, expand to be able to reach more such producers or whatnot, or reach more customers through delivery or whatever have you. Those are the things that we're looking for. So now's the time to really create your group, your community, your partners, and put together these ideas so that you can have that competitive grant and alternative funding. Josh, am I getting you at the wrong time as you're turning around?
No, I was expecting that you were going to turn it over, so I was just grabbing my notes.
Sweet.
So just a couple of things that I think come up through what I'm hearing that I feel I should share my opinion. I think when you look at the question about agritourism, and how you differentiate, there's not a lot of data out there because people aren't collecting it and farms aren't necessarily able to easily provide it. But I will give you a real world example. My farm sells pumpkins. We just sell pumpkins and squash, and they sit on a shelf and people stop by and they buy them. There's no hay rides, there's no corn maze, there's no apple cider donuts. It's just a commodity. And this is why I have a full-time job, because it's just not realistic. If and I had an established business to start with. So I think what you see in New Hampshire is the folks who do things like agritourism or value-added products or education, something that is ancillary to the agriculture operation, are really leading the way in terms of successful business models. But I think if you looked back at the slides that we were talking about for what specifically these equipment grants were going to do, they were speaking specifically to this type of collaboration and helping, and no model is left out. And I certainly don't want to disparage any particular model that people have. Certain things are going to work for certain people and certain things aren't. And so that's what part of this conversation is about, is exploring all of them. And what Seth's team is going to be doing is helping farms and food businesses navigate any possible change, or just even exploring what that change would look like. I know some of the conversations we had were, okay, so I do want to think about collaborating with the 8 farms around me. Well, that's going to require some probably legal assistance. That's going to require some tax planning assistance. These sorts of questions are what this supply chain coordination is going to be able to directly impact, whereas the other grant programs are going to give people infrastructure and equipment. But we wanted to make sure that there's room for folks to explore on a one-on-one basis what might work for you versus what might not work for you. And so I want to be aware of that as we move forward, that this isn't prescribing to everybody what we need to do. This is exploring options that then an individual business needs to take that initiative to do.
Thank you, Josh. Before we go to you, Peter, and you're next up on there, looking at the chat, we recognize that there is not a one-size-fits-all model. So philanthropy may work great in your neighborhood, maybe it doesn't. Maybe philanthropy doesn't meet your ethics or values, maybe it absolutely does. And maybe working with 7 or 8 other small farms and married to an anchor farm, or just those as one, all these different ways. Looking at Genuine Local put in about cooperatives, that might be another viable model. Food hubs, aggregators, another viable model. So we're really saying, well, in the link that Colleen put in, can you think of businesses, food businesses, and or farms that have a successful alternative model to what is common? And could you share the names and contacts of those farms? Our step with that is to kind of look at those, maybe contact them, pay them to share with us why they're successful, what their obstacles are, and then use that to try and create some professional development for ag service providers and other food businesses and farmers. So that's the goal of this whole discussion. What can work? We don't have to sit in judgment of what should or shouldn't or whatnot. Here's the situation as we see it. What do you see as successful models and alternatives that you could point Food Alliance Extension, Department of Ag towards? And so that would be something that we're looking for. Open Woods Farm, anything that is suggested, it would be great if it could be in that Google form, or you could email anything to Josh or me or Nicole. But I think we agree that Nicole probably would have the highest probability of it not getting lost. So yay to the executive functioning ability of Nicole and her organizational skills. So Peter, to you, please.
Yeah, so I'm wondering if there's well, first of all, Peter Bixby, House Environment and Agriculture Committee. So I'm wondering if there are any obstacles in the current statutes that define things like food and farm stands that would get in the way of some of the cooperative or collaborative sales or co-branding projects that might be people might be thinking of.
And there might be, since a farm stand is, I think it's 35%, don't quote me, of its own production. Maybe so there could be. And that's one of the ways that we also have monies for direct technical assistance, so we can reach out to lawyers and tax accountants and financial analysts to look at these to help give direct technical assistance and or just simply to answer such questions. And one of those things I hear you say is maybe there's legislation that will, or in policy and regulation changes that will be required as food systems and models evolve. So absolutely, it's a great idea. And that might come out of that strategic plan that Nicole's shop is jamming on too. So
thank you for saying that, Seth. Yes, I hope that they're identified there.
I think it was Henry next.
Yep.
Took me a minute to unmute. Thanks for taking my suggestion. I think one of the major things that's missing within the food system in New Hampshire is the availability of first, the availability of affordable livestock processing. There's a big hole, and I think there needs to be a way to fix that. But the second part of that is also some type of secondary value-added processing within the state. So like Donna Bascom said, she has extra produce. If there was a couple, not the commercial kitchen, because then that comes to you, but a place to take those that would package them as a New Hampshire product. Under the livestock processing, we really need to have some place that's doing smoking, making snack sticks. I send my venison to Missouri, and I have to put up 1,000 pounds to get snack sticks made. Consequently, I haven't had snack sticks for 15 years. I really feel that kind of secondary processing within New Hampshire would help New Hampshire products a lot.
And I can't resist but say, and I'll hand it to Josh, Henry, that the New Hampshire Food and Agriculture Strategic Plan that is currently underway, thanks to the New Hampshire Department of Ag Markets and Food and New Hampshire Charitable Foundation, there are at least two specific briefs. The meat and eggs brief, which is almost out for public review, about a week, and the value-added processing brief that I would really appreciate your thoughts on, and you making sure that what's captured in there as key policy changes and investments needed in the state reflect your experience. Because I think they're very aligned right now. I've seen the drafts with what you're saying, but that's a great place for you to say, did they get it? Did they get it in a way that reflects your experience, or would you tweak something before it's finalized?
Okay, yeah, if you could email me them.
Colleen will get that to you. How about that?
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, Josh, to you.
Yeah, so not to diminish the problem there that you've addressed, Henry, but this program specifically cannot be used for livestock. USDA had its own livestock meat processing and poultry processing grants that went out, and there is a processing place in New Hampshire that was awarded, I believe, $2 million through that. So this one excludes meat and poultry. So I apologize for we've been involved with this now for a year and a half, 2 years, and I forget what I know that I don't explicitly say out front. So sorry to bring that bad news. The other thing I just want to really quickly say, along the lines of some of the comments I'm seeing, I think a lot of these are really great ideas in terms of, what would be an incredible thing for New Hampshire to have some of these processing things and cooperatives. Remember, everything that happens needs somebody to run it, take the risk to invest in something like that, and to find that there will be some profit there. So I think these discussions are leading us into things to explore, but some of these big picture ideas that could be statewide or big regional wide, we've got to also identify, who are the players that could enter that space and be willing to take that risk. And they're going to be much more, they're going to need much more investment than $100,000 to do some of those things.
Hey, Josh, there was a question about the local restaurant, and I get that we're not into the direct marketing, wouldn't be it. If an entity such as a restaurant wanted to actually open space up for processing, that would be an eligible activity, or no?
So there are, as this is a USDA program, so their rules, they have very explicit rules. I commented on that for there's an entities eligible for infrastructure grants. section there, and the same rules would apply to the equipment only grants. And so as I read it, they would probably need to create a separate business that is agricultural processing, for-profit entities operating middle of the supply chain activities. You know, you might be able to reach out. We could reach out directly to USDA to see on a case-by-case basis. But the way that I read it is the main purpose of that entity would have to be that middle of the supply chain processing, not just sort of like a secondary thing that they do. And so if their main goal was, if they're a restaurant, then they're a restaurant.
That was excellent. I went to that page 8 and I wasn't clear in the quick read. But again, this conversation isn't only for the equipment grants, because you're really going to get maybe 10, 15 max grants. And this is really looking at how do we take this beyond just this next round of funding and look at a resilient food system and what could educate us towards that. And the other thing to say is it need not only be in New Hampshire. We know that there are some other places in Maine and Rhode Island that, have businesses that we're looking to explore as well. So
I'm sorry, when will I was on the New Hampshire Department of Ag's website yesterday, and I did not see any text. It says coming soon. Josh, how quickly, because these kinds of writings and formulations and everything to get together to, when can we see the skeleton of the requirements and whatnot on the website? I did find in Vermont some similar text, but when will New Hampshire have that available?
Sorry, I was on another screen and trying to navigate to the mute button. So we're going to launch the RFA, the specific RFA, on December 1st. So that's when that will show up. I'm going to link you. I'm going to put a link in the chat right here, if I can find it, to the USDA webpage. This is a USDA program that we administer. So the nuts and bolts of some of the specifics are essentially, they're there, and we'll have a template application, but everything that we create that's specific to New Hampshire is generated from the program scope and requirements that USDA puts out. So I'll see what we can do to maybe get a little bit more detailed state-specific information up ahead of the launch of the RFA, but the actual application and some of those details will be coming out. They'll all be released at the same time. But I'll take a look at what some of our neighboring states are doing, and if New Hampshire can provide similar information.
Maybe the better question. Maybe the better question was just deadlines from when the information is released. When December 1st to January 29th, how long from when the information is released to things, having written a grant that took me 18 months, it just takes a while to get to the logistics of the actual writing.
Yes, so I can tell you the RFA will be released December 1st. The application will be due January 29th. There'll be a review process at the state level. We then submit that to USDA, and I have no control over how long it takes after that. Then once they come back with information, usually there's a period where we have to submit requests to our applicants to make some changes. Again, goes back to USDA. They get final approval, and then all contracts then have to go through the state contracting process. So I don't even want to pretend to give a timeline that would say April or May.
No, you answered it. You answered it by December 1st is going to be when New Hampshire is going to be opening, and then we're closing January 29th. I was just hoping from now till then that there was a chunk of information other than what the USDA has, if there were any other specific New Hampshire guidelines, and we're covering a lot of that today. So I'm just wondering about all the people that may not be on this call that might be interested in participating in this program, but are kind of wondering if New Hampshire has specificity in addition to what the USDA is asking.
Yeah, I
And
think
I
it's a
have to
great
jump in
idea.
and, oh, sorry, Josh. I had to jump in and say we're at time. We really take that seriously and want to end. But we will keep abreast of information that is available and make sure to get it out through our communications channels, and I'm sure the Department of Ags as well. And right now that over the next 2 months is TBD. So thank you for joining us. Know that this conversation was just the first to share that overarching perspective of what this RFSI program is, how Seth and Josh and others are envisioning the funds that are already being utilized and will be utilized, and that you should all continue to think about those models and send them to me, to Colleen, in the weeks and days ahead as you think of ideas or something occurs to you, because we have the next while to start to generate that list. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Josh and Seth, for taking the time to share all that interesting information with us. And we'll be in touch soon. Colleen, did I miss anything?
Nope. Enjoy your Friday, everyone.
Thank
Happy
you.
weekend.
Bye, Charles.